All right, well, let's start with the life of Joseph. We're going to cover chapter 37 and then chapter 39 through 50. So these chapters deal with the life of Joseph, first son of Rachel, favorite wife of Jacob. And so that's why he's treated extra special. Remember, we skipped chapter 38 because chapter 38 fits in with the chapter 34 and the perversions in the land of Canaan, the attempts at intermarriage. And because of that, I think God moved them out of the land of Canaan and moved them down to the land of Egypt, where they would be left alone and really kind of shunned, kept in their own territory. And so God's protecting his people. And so we're going to start at chapter 37, one of my favorite stories in all the Bible, the story of Joseph. Great story. Let's pray before we begin. Thank you, Lord, for this day. Help us as we study your word today, to gain from it, to be challenged by it. Lord, we pray that you would meet each of our students' needs and give them strength. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're going to see a lot of things about Joseph, kind of like I did with each of the other patriarchs, Abraham and Isaac. I'll give you some things, and Jacob. I'll give you some adjectives about each one of them, and that's the way we'll divide this up. First of all, we're going to see Joseph in chapter 37 as the favored son, the favored son. So go to Genesis chapter 37. Thank you. Edit the video. We're missing several more. Don't know what's up, so. Everything okay?
Yeah, I just...
Did you get out of class late, or?
No,
Oh, okay. Okay. The others, I don't know where they are, so. All right, so the favored son. Let me divide this up into several areas, 3 to be exact. We're going to see him first we'll look first at the dreams of Joseph. The dreams of Joseph. Jacob obviously lives for a long time, but our outline switches now to Joseph from his life and the aspect there. So the rest of the chapters in the book of Genesis discuss mainly the life of Joseph, not Jacob, and so that's what we'll do. Anyway, so Joseph has a number of dreams, and God reveals things to Joseph through dreams. Don't depend on this for yourself. Why do we not put too much stock in dreams? Because you've had some pretty silly ones, right? Why should we not put, at least biblically, why do we not believe that God reveals things to us through dreams anymore? Dustin? Because his word is that revelation, and we don't need the revelation through dreams anymore. Which, by the way, this isn't the first time that God has spoken to someone through a dream, but I think it's the first time that God spoke to someone prophetically through a dream. Abraham had God appeared to Abraham in the night, things like that. But this is the first time where prophetic dreams are given to somebody, and then this happens how many times? A lot of times to Joseph. Twice here, the butler and the baker in the prison, and then again the Pharaoh's dreams. So there may be more, but that's the ones that we know about in the life of Joseph. So, the dreams of Joseph, what does that do? It brings the wrath of his 10 half-brothers upon him. So he brings down the wrath of his brothers on him. Let me give you 3 reasons why they're mad at him, why their wrath has come down upon him. 3 reasons. Well, we know in chapter 37, verse 2, first of all, that he brought unto his father their evil report. He brought to his father their evil report. Second reason is because he had a coat of many colors. A coat of many colors. Of course, this coat of many colors was an obvious sign to anybody that saw it that he's the special son. And then the third reason that they were angry with him is because of his dreams. What are the two dreams? You know that. I gave you some of these things in the last class period, did I not? I think I took you right to there. You know what? I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I just realized that. Sorry. I thought I had stopped at Joseph, and I took the last few minutes and went all the way through this first chapter. I'm sorry. My bad. Let's jump down to chapter 39. Can you edit all that out? Sorry. As I'm giving this, I'm thinking, wait a second. I know I covered these things. So, my bad. All right, chapter 39 then. That's where we left off. Wow. Shoo. You guys are writing things down, so I was really doing a double take thinking, okay, why are they writing this down? Because I remember giving this to them. All right, chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him. All right, so we see Joseph, we saw him first as the favored son. Now see him next as the faithful steward. The faithful steward in chapter 39. And that's where I left you off, right? Hi. What's he waving at me for? High school kid. Jalen. Go close the thing, somebody. I can't be distracted like that. It's on the left side. The bottom one. Pull the bottom. There you go. Too bad, buddy. Find your own way in. This isn't how it's done. Wow. Interesting. I look up and I couldn't figure out, kind of barely through the blind, he was trying to get my attention. I thought it was something serious, then I realized it was a high schooler. Okay. Notice here in chapter 39, by the way, I really believe that as Joseph is brought down to Egypt, he doesn't know, obviously, what's going to happen. He doesn't know that he's going to be the second in command. He doesn't know what he's going to be doing in his life, just like we don't, like you don't. I'm more settled than you because I'm older, a lot older. But young people don't know what they're going to be doing. But he is going through times right now in Potiphar's house and in the prison that will prepare him for the future. It'll prepare him for being second in command. So you don't just walk into that. When he's 30 years old, and if you look at the Israelite, the normal Jewish ages, at 30 years old you become a man. Okay, Jesus started his earthly ministry when he was 30 years old. You're a young man at the age of 30. And that's the age that he'll be when he gets out of prison. So, I know you are young men, but think of yourself as having a lot to learn still. If you do that, you'll definitely be ahead of most 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 29-year-olds. You have a lot to learn. There's many, many lessons that you need still before you can really say, I'm settled in. Anyway, so Joseph has a lot of things to learn, and God is always using events in our lives to prepare us for the future. I think that's just a great picture here that he had no idea. It's easy on our side of it to say, yeah, Joseph, he was going to be second in command, so he had a reason to be excited. No, he didn't. As far as he knew, he's going to be a prisoner and a slave the rest of his life. He might as well be a good one. Okay? And so that was his purpose. That was his goal, was just to be the best servant he could be. And so Joseph did that. But there's a number of things that he's got to learn, and that's what I want to give you here in chapter 39 under the faithful steward. First of all, he learned to be a servant. We see his service. His service. He learned to serve. Joseph being sold as a slave to Potiphar, an officer in Pharaoh's Egyptian palace guard. So, a captain of the guard. That probably puts him in somewhat of a position like a Secret Service agent today. Secret Service police, keeping track of the White House, or keeping around the Capitol. This would be his job, working directly in the city and in the palace of the king Pharaoh. That's pretty much, it has to be what that means. Chapter 38, verse 30 says that. No, sorry, wrong one. Is it 37:30? It's not 38:30. Oh well. Anyway, but chapter 39, verse 1. So there he is with Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian. So Joseph learns to serve in this palace. Learns to work hard, does his best, does everything above and beyond what's expected. Great lessons here for all of us. With the blessings of God, he's quickly entrusted with the entire administration of Potiphar's household. Many times, the Bible says of him that the Lord was with him. He was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, and the master saw that the Lord was with him, that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Over and over and over again, you see this about Joseph. He's got the blessings of God on his life. Now, just because you're a servant and a slave and a prisoner doesn't mean you can't have God's blessing. That's another interesting point here, is he's going through this difficult time. Doesn't mean that God isn't with him. Just means that wherever you are in life, that God is with you and he can bless you. We talked about this the other day in chapel. It reminds me again of the wilderness. Just because you're in the wilderness doesn't mean God's not with you. This is his wilderness experience. God was with him, no question about it, the whole way through. So God intends for us to struggle. So if you're struggling, don't fight it, don't run from it, embrace it, realize that this is God's plan for you. In your 20s, it's a great time for God to work you over and prepare you and to mold you into someone that he can use in your 30s. Hopefully it ends at your 30s. I got married when I was 30 myself. I clearly see that for myself, that God had a lot of things to teach me. So we see first his service. Secondly, I want you to see his self-control. He also learned this very, very important lesson in preparation for becoming the second in command. He's enticed to commit immorality. Wife of Potiphar, he refused her. And so when he refused her, finally, she accused him, turned around and accused him of rape. And so that he ends up getting thrown in jail. And into a dungeon, the Bible tells us. As he goes into that dungeon, just understand that their dungeons were very different than our prisons of today. This dungeon would have been very dark, probably down in the ground, cold, chilly, and probably locked up most of the time in a very small area or in a very small general area, several rooms. It seems like because he rose through that again, where he had some authority in the prison, that he had more room than just his cell. But anyway, the Bible tells us later when he was brought out that he was shaved. So we see there probably that he hadn't shaved or bathed likely in all the time that he was in prison. So how long was he in prison? He was 17 when he was brought down to Egypt. And the Bible tells us that he was 30 when he came out of the prison. So we don't know. Probably pretty common belief is he was about 3 years in Potiphar's house and 10 years in the prison. So that's a pretty good guess. He had enough time in Potiphar's house to be exalted and to be lifted up and to be given authority and have all kinds of control of the money. And then he also is in prison for quite a few years. Okay, so you can adjust either one of these. But he's in prison for years, for sure. We know that he was in prison for the last 2 years because that's when the butler forgot about him for 2 years, the Bible tells us. But anyway, so just picture yourself, young man in jail. Not you, ladies. But a young man in jail, picture yourself. No shaving, no bathing, hair everywhere, filthy as can be. That's the way he lived. All right, so he learned self-control here with Potiphar's wife, though. And then third, his sufferings. His sufferings, for your notes. He learned to suffer. I don't like suffering. Oh, I don't like suffering. I don't like pain. I don't like prolonged uncomfortable, you know. What does suffering teach you? Patience. Let me dwell on patience a bit. It teaches you faith, but it teaches you patience. What does the Bible say about Job? You have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord, so on and so on. The patience of Job. Why was he patient? Because he suffered. He learned, what does it mean to suffer? You're waiting. You're waiting on God to give you relief. You're waiting. It teaches you patience. Job learned great patience. He was the most patient man. Why? Because he learned to wait for the Lord's timing, wait for the Lord to do the work. And if there's anything we need, I know if there's anything I need, it's patience. To just trust the Lord. That's a great thing as you get older, you'll see. You go through many times where you see where things aren't so great in your life. And you see God work and brings you through that. And so you learn when you're going down, just wait. Just bide your time, trust the Lord, do right, keep doing right, because you'll come back out of that valley again. You learn patience. You learn patience. And so Joseph has to learn this. And every young man, I'm telling you, all you young men, you need these 3 lessons. Very, very important. Learn to serve, learn to control yourself, and learn patience and suffering, and be able to go through that kind of a time. Well, he ends up in prison here, and of course the Bible says here again that the Lord was with Joseph, verse 21 of chapter 39, and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Now, let's go to chapter 40. We're going to call this chapter the Forgotten Servant. The Forgotten Servant. Mention some things about Joseph here. The jailer recognized Joseph's character. And so he again rises through the ranks. Joseph is always the cream of the crop, as we call it. He rises to the top. And he puts Joseph in charge of the entire prison administration. He committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Now my guess is this is a lazy prison keeper, a prison guard. But still, God used that to give Joseph some, how would you say, relief from the suffering. Give him something to do. Give him some purpose. So Joseph rises up again through the rank. Well, for some reason, in the midst of this, the anger of the Pharaoh comes out against his two of his officers who are in charge of food. One guy's in charge of baking the food, and the other guy's in charge of serving the food. And you know the story, the butler and the baker. The baker makes the food, and the butler serves the food. One of them, the king found out, one of them, and he blamed both of them at first, but one of them had probably tried to kill the king or in some way rise up against the Pharaoh. And so the king says he's going to commit both of these 2 men to prison until he finds out what happened and who tried to kill him and so on. You know, I don't know if somebody died by, what do they call it? The cupbearer. I have no idea. That kind of stuff intrigues me. But He blames these two men, and they are thrown in prison with Joseph. Now notice that this prison, this dungeon, is a place where the kings and the high-ranking officers, where their servants or their offenders go. So this is some kind of a king's prison, is probably what this is not the common prison. So anyway, here come these two high-ranking officials into the prison with Joseph, and they're underneath Joseph's authority, because remember, he's in control of all the prisoners. In the midst of this, then, these two prisoners have dreams. Verse 5, they dreamed a dream, both of them. Each man is dreaming his one night. Each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt were bound in the prison. So what happens here? They both dream dreams, and unbelievably, Joseph notices that they're in a bad mood the next morning. Isn't that something? I just love this, that Joseph notices these things. He's a prisoner, but he notices when other prisoners are having a hard day. He says, hey, how you doing? Oh, not good. Had a rough night dreaming, sleeping last night. So both of them dream, and Joseph gives the credit to God, and God helps Joseph correctly interpret each dream. Let me just mention to you what the butler's dream was real quick, and then the baker. The butler dreams that he sees a vine with 3 branches beginning to bud and blossom and produce grapes. In his dream, the butler squeezed the juice from the grapes and served it to Pharaoh in the royal cups. And so Joseph says, hey, that's God telling you the 3 clusters are 3 days. In 3 days, and I love how specific Joseph is in this interpretation. 3 days, you'll be out of here. The king is going to recognize that you're not guilty. You are not the one who did this. And so, sure enough, 3 days later, the butler's gone. Now he goes back to the palace. He's working for the king, and he's the butler. He's the main guy serving the food. The baker, seeing what had happened to the butler. Now, remember, the baker is guilty, right? He's guilty. He died after this. He's guilty. He knew he was guilty. So the baker is trying to get away with this. He's hoping that this guy, Joseph, that his God doesn't really know how to give interpretation of dreams. So he said, hey, I had a dream too. What's your God say about my dream? I dreamed that there were 3 branches. I had 3 baskets on my head. And the top basket had some special goods for the Pharaoh. And suddenly some birds flew down and ate the food out of my top basket. And so Joseph said, in 3 days, the king is going to take off your head, and the birds are going to come and eat it. And so the baker knew then, I'm sure the baker said, this God of Joseph knows what he's talking about. This is a powerful God, because he knows I did it. So sure enough, 3 days later, the butler and the baker come out of jail, one to his position and one to his death. Joseph asked him, I love this. Joseph is very human still. He asks this butler, can you please not forget about me? I'm more than content to be here and to be over the prisoners, but I'd like to get out of here, to be honest with you. And so sure enough, the butler forgets to tell the king that there was a man named Joseph. All right, well, that brings us then to Joseph soon getting out of prison. So that's my next main point. Chapters 41 to 44, I'm going to call this the famed statesman. So we've seen the favored son, the faithful steward, the forgotten servant, and now the famed statesman. Oh, yes. Best part of the story. Okay, several things. Well, for your outline's sake, I could just tell stories all day, but for your outline's sake, let's start with this. First, the revelation of Joseph. The revelation of Joseph. And it has to do, of course, revealing the king's dream. 2 years after the butler went back, on the birthday of the king, by the way. So I don't know if the king was having, a special birthday party again 2 years later and he had this dream or what, but if it's to the day. But 2 years later, Pharaoh had 2 dreams in the same night. He dreamed, he fell back asleep, he woke up, realized that this dream was very significant, finally fell back to sleep and had another dream that was very similar to the first dream. And then he wakes up and he is having a rotten morning. All the servants taking care of the king come in the morning. Here's the butler. Remember, the butler serves food. The butler walks in. He's doing his normal duty. The bakers and all the people working in the back kitchen. They're all doing their job. And here comes the butler. He's ready to serve. And he's got, of course, people working underneath him. And they're ready to serve. And everybody says, man, the king's in a bad mood. Butler says, well, okay, what's unusual, right? No, what's wrong? And he said, well, somebody said he dreamed some dreams last night. Well, okay, big deal. So he goes in and he serves the king his food. And the king is in a terrible mood. I've got to have some answers. I dreamed these dreams and I can't figure out what they mean. And I'm sure just like that, the light clicked on in his mind and he remembered that he had gone through the same experience of dreaming and needing an answer to that dream. And so, of course, the 2 dreams, you know these. There were 7 sleek, fat cows coming out of the river, out of the Nile River and eating the grass. And suddenly 7 skinny cows came out, ribs all sticking out, the Bible tells us. I've seen those kinds of animals. And suddenly the skinny cows ate the fat cows. Now that is a weird dream. When skinny cows are eating fat cows. Cows are not carnivorous. They don't eat meat. And then he goes back to sleep, dreams another dream. 7 heads of grain on a stalk, with every kernel well formed and plump. Suddenly 7 more heads appeared on the stalk, shriveled and eaten or withered by the east wind. And the dream ended as the thin heads devoured the plump heads. Now this is not yellow corn on the cob. This is not corn on the cob this is talking about. This is grain. So the head on a wheat stalk, that's what's really odd about it, is there were 7 heads of grain. Like a wheat plant or an oat plant. This is grain. Egyptians, there's no history anywhere of them raising corn in Egypt. Okay, so I think it's the Becca series shows the big old ears of corn. That's not what this is. The word corn here means grain. It's a broad term for grain. There is a lot of evidence, of course, around the Nile River that they raised wheat and other kinds of grains. So, Pharaoh has his magicians all trying to figure out what it means, and the butler, of course, says, hey, I remember. Remember when I went to prison? I wasn't guilty. It was the baker that was guilty. But I went to prison. There was another guy in there in prison who revealed the dreams. He has a God who really knows what dreams mean. And so, of course, the king immediately calls for him. Look at chapter 41, verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment, took a bath, and came in unto Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God, Elohim, my God, shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. And he tells him the dream, going down to verse number 25. Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of the grain are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. It's going to be worse than anything you've ever seen. There's not many famines in Egypt. Why? Right? The Nile River. So there must have been some kind of a very great lack of rain, downstream, which would be down, southern Egypt, as the Nile River flows north. There must have been a great lack of rain that the Nile River basically almost runs dry, or at least very low, to where it doesn't flood, and it doesn't. They depended on the flooding of the Nile every year to irrigate the land. And if that doesn't happen, there's going to be a great famine. So there must have been a real problem with this for 7 years. All right, so Joseph says, hint, hint, verse 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Now, what if Joseph would have just said, this is what's going to happen. It's going to be 7 years of great food, a lot of food, 7 years of famine. And stepped out of it. That wouldn't be enough. A wise person like Joseph is, immediately, and you can see this in Potiphar's house. I'm sure he was just like this. You can see it in the prison. Joseph came up with solutions. I mean, that's just he's made this way. Hey, there's going to be a famine. What do we have to do to take care of it? How do we get through 7 years of famine? The only obvious answer is we have to get ready for it by 1, 2, 3, list them out. This is what we have to do. We have to get somebody in charge of saving a lot of the food. We have to have buildings built. We have to have a process to store away this food, which, by the way, grain is very important how you store it if it's going to last. That's with any crops. Green crops, pile them together, they mold. They go bad on you. So you had to dry them. You had to figure out how to store them where they wouldn't go bad on you and mold and rot. So he immediately thinks of answers. I like that. This is what we got to do. So he's not just, hint, hint. I'm here. You want somebody wise? Here's some ideas. No. But still, let them, verse 35, gather. Actually, go back to verse 34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. This is a 20% tax on all the food raised in the first 7 years. And, verse 35, let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine. Okay, I don't know about, I know then they started doling out all this food, and you can talk about the store, the common store, whatever. Is this communism, I don't know that Joseph, another solution maybe would have been to tell the people there's going to be a famine. Because as I see it, the people weren't warned. They never did tell the people. And I don't know why exactly. I think Pharaoh didn't want to scare everybody, but it would have, I don't know. To me, that's another solution they could have come to and said, look, everybody, there's going to be a famine. Now, if they don't believe it, this is a strange god to these Egyptians. But it seems to me like a possible solution would have been to tell people there's going to be a famine. You need to put away half of your food or a fourth of your food or whatever. And so anyway, Pharaoh keeps everything. Pharaoh's responsible. He does this tax, and then they store it away. And the people, as soon as the famine comes, they're surprised by it. I think that's the indication that they're surprised by it. Come to Pharaoh, what shall we do? He says, hey, I got all this food here. And then he ends up actually buying up the land, which was, I think, I don't know, you can argue about all these things. Bottom line is they made it through the famine. That's the bottom line. All right, so Pharaoh said unto his servants, verse 38, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God has shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And made him to ride in the second chariot. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Wow. Look at verse 45. Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On. He was 30 years old. By the way, this marriage, he married the daughter of a high-ranking priest. In Egypt, the priesthood was royalty. It was just beneath the throne. Okay, so any priests that you read about in Egypt, you can find this in all secular history of Egypt, the priesthood was royalty. And so Joseph married royalty. He's given a priest's daughter. And that would make his children, by the way, that would make his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, that would make them royalty as well. And the great thing, I'll point it out when we get there, but in Genesis 49, Jacob takes Ephraim and Manasseh away from Jacob for a little bit and says, these are my sons. I'm adopting them. And what he's saying is, these two sons are not going to be Egyptian royalty. They are going to be Jews. They're going to be our family. It's our side of the family, not that side of the family. And that's a big step, by the way. That's an act of faith, as I see it, that they were believing that this is going to be the line of God's chosen people, not of the wicked worldly Egyptians. Good move. Okay. All right. Oh, so I'm kind of missing my outline here. First, we saw the revelation of Joseph, and that's the dream he interpreted to the Pharaoh. Secondly, see the elevation of Joseph. The elevation of Joseph. He's given a wife of Egyptian royalty. Supposedly his long name. That'd be a good trivia question, wouldn't it? What was Joseph's Egyptian name? We always say, what was Daniel's Babylonian name, Belteshazzar? What was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's Jewish names? What were they? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So what was Joseph's Egyptian name? Zaphnath-Paneah. That'd be a great one. Or you could say, who was Zaphnath-Paneah? You'd been like, wow, Joseph. I bet you vast majority of people don't know that. That'd be a good trivia question. Supposedly, that name means one who furnishes the sustenance of the land. It's kind of a made-up name, obviously, to fit what he did. His father-in-law is a major priest, politician. Joseph is 30 years old. All right, also with this elevation then, not only does he get married and married into a priest family, but then he has two sons. Of course, you know what those names are, Ephraim and Manasseh. But what do the names mean? That's the key thing. Manasseh was first. Forget. Made to forget or caused to forget. Forget. He forgot his suffering, his affliction. Doesn't mean he actually forgot it. It means he chose to forget it. It means that as he's going through life, he didn't purposely try to forget. It didn't come the first thing to his mind anymore. He lived so good now, and he was so happy in what he was doing and contented in what he was doing that he just didn't think about it much anymore. And then the other one, the name is Ephraim, means fruitful. Fruitful in the land of my affliction. All right, so Ephraim and Manasseh are the fulfillment. They give Joseph fulfillment in life. That's the bottom line. What do you think at this point? Should Joseph have tried to contact his family? What do you think? Hey, I don't know. I mean, he's years removed from this. What do you think,
They
Rachel?
didn't exactly want him there when he left either.
Yeah, but
They didn't want him back.
they don't have much choice, really, if he decides he wants to bring an army with him to come visit. They'll probably be nice. Trevor?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that right then he was doing what God wanted him to do, and that was to be a leader among the Egyptians.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it wasn't really necessary
Yeah.
that he do that.
Yeah. Can he be happy here? He obviously is. God's caused me to be fruitful. He was happy. No, he's very different. In some way, I really wonder what his life was like. Was he, I don't think he went to the priest of On's temple. I don't think he went to the temple. I think his wife I think he probably told her about the true God. Everywhere he went, he talked. The hand of God on his life showed itself out in his works, and I'm sure in his speech, and he talked about it. Trevor, go ahead.
Because he was an example of Pharaoh, obviously, because Pharaoh
Yeah.
proclaimed, your God is the one
Yeah.
that has this wisdom, and also his children, he named them names that would
Yes.
glorify God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'd say
Dustin.
maybe he didn't contact his family because he knew that they would be coming there eventually, since he knew about the family.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe he did have time to think about it beforehand. It's a good point. All right, I brought my map here, but of course Egypt is even off the map over here. He's a long ways from home. He's, a couple weeks, at least a week or so of traveling, of good, steady traveling from home. And he's living his own life. He's completely content, it seems, to live his own life. I don't know. He's young. He's 30 years old. He's got plenty of time to see his family, but he has completely moved on. I think that's a very important lesson to realize for ourselves, that when you go through hard times, don't keep holding that there and saying, well, I went through this, and so I have a right to be bitter, or I have a right to be angry, or my family. I don't think he was bitter at his family. I don't think he hated his brothers. He didn't. When his brothers came, he gave them a hard time, but it wasn't out of revenge. That was in the past. It was done with. That didn't affect him in the slightest. All right. The elevation of Joseph. Okay, that brings us third then. The confusion of Joseph's brothers. Oh yes, here they come. All right, the 7 years of famine of plenty go by, and there's lots and lots and lots of food. Joseph has been responsible for collecting a 20% tax on all the food and storing it away. Building buildings. I actually have a little experience in building grain bins, those big round things with the cone top on them. When I was 17, I worked for a guy for about 6 months, and two other guys building and not refurbishing, but rebuilding grain bins and fixing things and so on. I had no idea that all this goes into a grain bin. The floor has all these little holes in it, and it blows air up, big fans underneath a section at the bottom of the grain bin that blows air to dry them out. Then it's got these augers coming up through it, and so it's literally stirring the grain all the time and blowing air on it. Huge operation. I had no idea. So the augers all have to work right. The air blowing underneath. Everything has to be perfect, or it will rot. And I remember we had grain bins that the fans had stopped working. So they'd call us in there real quick. We'd have to come in there and clean out the bottom couple 6 to 12 inches of molded, rotted grain so that the air could get back up through there. I don't know. It was really amazing to me, really neat process. And as I think of that, Joseph had to do something, if not like that, maybe bagging them, drying the grain and then bagging them individually in 50-pound bags or something like, I'm picturing like that. Anyway, it's a big process, very big process. And this would be huge, huge buildings, warehouses full, storage silos or something full of grain. Of course, the land of Egypt is very dry, isn't it? So that would definitely help in storing this grain away. I love to think about all those details. But anyway, so the famine then comes, and they're in the second year of the famine, and here comes these 10 brothers, the Bible tells us, from the land of Canaan, chapter 42, verse 1. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, why do you look one upon another? What do you stand there looking at each other for? Sounds like my dad. Why don't you do something? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence. Now, Joseph is 38 probably at this point, 39 when he reveals himself to his brothers. That means they are in their 40s. And Dad, get on there and go buy us food. Yeah. And how old is Jacob at this point? Jacob, remember, is 91 years older than Joseph. So if Joseph is 38, you do the math. 38 and 91 is 130, 129, something like that, right? If I remember right. Okay, so Joseph's 10 brothers come down to buy corn in Egypt, but Benjamin wasn't with him. And verse 7, Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them through an interpreter, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Now most of the people that were buying food were Egyptians. So here's these foreigners, obviously foreigners. Egyptians had a very unique look. You ever seen pictures of the pointed beards? And that was mostly common among the nobility, but also even the common people looked very, very different. Well, here come these shepherds, these Canaanite-looking people, and they would have looked very different, totally different clothing, totally different haircuts, different ideas of cleanliness. Egyptians had a lot of emphasis, especially in the nobility, on cleanliness. And that's one of the attacks, one of the plagues was lice. Oh man, the priests of the religions would have been totally put out with having to deal with the lice. But anyway, so here come these Canaanite-looking people. Where are you from? Everybody knew they were foreigners. And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them. You're going to bow down to me. I mean, can you imagine? Here they are bowing down. I bet you Joseph couldn't keep a smile off his face. Okay, yep, there they are. Bowing down. Oh, yeah. They have no clue. I mean, they are so lost. It's just hilarious. Then he says to them, ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. They said to him, nay, my lord, but to buy food. We are all one man's son. Oh boy, here they go, What do we call this? TMI. Too much information. They start to tell all their details of their history because they don't want to be seen as spies. Well, of course, he then used that against them. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. He said, nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. They said, thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. Joseph said to them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Yes, you are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved by the life of Pharaoh. Ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh. Surely ye are spies. He put them all together into ward 3 days. Joseph catches them on the 3rd day and says, This do and live, for I fear God. I'm sure they said, Yeah, right. You don't even know our God. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. So Joseph concedes a little bit. At first he said, You're all stuck here and one of you is going back. Now he says, I'll switch it. We'll have one of you stay and the other 9 go back, and bring your other brother with you when you come back. All right, so as he's quiet in the background, Joseph, he hears them talking in their own language, in Joseph's language of a child. And they said, verse 21, one to another, We are verily guilty concerning Joseph, concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. And Reuben, big brother Reuben, spake I not unto you? I told you, do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear. No, you didn't. You said, leave him in the pit, and then you were going to quietly, sneakily come back and get him out later. You never told them, don't do this. Did not I do not sin against the child? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. Wherever Joseph is, he's probably dead. These bad things 20 years later, 22 years later, the bad things that are happening to us now are because of what we did 22 years ago. Now, I'm about this age. I'm 40 years old, right about the age some of these guys would have been. I never think like that. If I'm going through a hard time in my life, I don't say, the reason I'm going through this hard time is because of what I did when I was 17 years old. I don't think like that. I hope you, when you're older like me, you don't think like that. Only people who have done something really, really bad and are living in guilt and never deal with that guilt are still dealing with it when they're 40-something years old. This is a shame. This should not happen to Christians. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by interpreter. And he turned himself about from them and wept. He knew. That told Joseph what he was wanting to hear. That they felt bad for what they had done to him. They felt bad. It would make you feel good too. It would make us feel good. Hey, at least they realize that, but that's not enough yet. He wants, through all this, through these tests that he does for them, always remember, he's not trying to get his brothers. He's not trying to get revenge on them. He wants them to repent. He wants to for sure know that they have repented of their sin. And the best way to do that, I really think Joseph could have revealed himself from right here. He could have said, hey, I'm Joseph. But that wouldn't have accomplished what he really wanted, and that was to be 100% sure that they had repented. No, there's nothing wrong with him revealing himself to them here, I don't think. And they would have, but in order to help them the most, I think he waited. And that's him thinking of his brothers, caring for his brothers. So anyway, they turn around to leave. And of course, as they're heading down the trail, when he finally lets them go, they find their money in the sack. And the warning was very clear that they have to come back with their little brother if they're going to come back. Okay. I have a couple minutes left. Let's finish this up to the point of where he reveals himself. After a period of time, they've been back home. Of course, the famine's still going on. They're at Hebron, plain of Mamre, with their father. And the famine continues on, and so finally they have to go back to Egypt. We don't know exactly how long this is. It goes from chapter 42 into chapter 43. When they had eaten up the corn, chapter 43, verse 2, which they had brought out of Egypt, Their father said, "Go again." And Judah said, "We can't go again unless we bring Benjamin." So eventually he allows Benjamin to go with them, and they go present themselves to Joseph again. When they get there, of course, Joseph, the Bible says he weeps for Benjamin. He wants to tell him that he's Joseph. But he waits, and he invites these brothers to his house for a meal. Can you imagine, as rude as he was to them? And now he's inviting them to a meal. They must have just absolutely been really, really confused. This doesn't make any sense. They're fed at a separate table from Joseph. That was the way Egyptians did things, custom. You don't eat with foreigners. Eating is something you do with family. And so he treats them still as foreigners, even though they were family. To their amazement, he seats them at the table in the order of their ages. Oldest Reuben, and down the line, all the way around the table, and Benjamin, of course, the last one. Oh, this is great. Can you imagine the confusion? They look around and they're like, okay, what is the deal here? He invites us to his house, and now we're sitting in the order of our ages. You know, the light should have gone on, you would think, but no, it didn't. And then he gives Benjamin 5 times as much food as the others. This is a test. What's he testing here about his brothers?
To see if they're still jealous.
Jealousy. Jealousy. See if they're jealous still. They're not. They seem fine. Maybe they were just too nervous to ask. What are you doing with all that food, Benjamin? You know. So anyway, they're eating, and then Joseph, while they're eating, he has his silver cup put into Benjamin's sack. And then as the brothers get done eating and they leave, now Joseph is going to test their loyalty and their love. Their love. Do they love their little brother Benjamin? Or they treat him the same way that they treated Joseph? Remember, if Joseph is gone, which he is, from his father, that means Benjamin was now the favorite son. Benjamin probably had a coat of many colors. Right? He was the favorite son. And so Joseph is testing his brothers to see if they treat Benjamin the same way they treated him. So, anyway, he has the silver cup put into Benjamin's sack, and of course, as they leave, he sends a servant after them to stop them and say, "One of you stole the master's silver cup." And they are all adamant. "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it." Everybody says, and of course he starts at the oldest again, and he works his way down through the ages, each one checking their sacks for the silver cup. And can you imagine, here as they get closer to Benjamin's sack, all the brothers got to be thinking the same thing. If Benjamin stole that cup, he better not have stolen that cup. And of course, it's in Benjamin's sack. Well, they know he didn't steal it, but they believe, they're trying to figure out what happened. And so they come to Benjamin's defense, and that's where they pass the test. Judah steps forward and says, well, they go back to the palace and said, "Hey, sir, we don't know what happened with the cup, but our father," there's another test. He tested their love for their brother Benjamin. He also tested their love for their father. Because now they say, and they passed it, they say, "Our father's an old man. He's already lost one son. If he loses another, he's going to die. We don't want to see this happen to our father." So Judah says, "I'll stay instead of Benjamin." So he tested their jealousy, he tested their love for their brother, he tested their love for their father. And that was the final thing. When Joseph saw that they loved their father enough that Judah was willing to stay. We see that at the end of chapter 44. Verse 33, "Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord. I'll stay, and let the lad go up with his brethren." Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. He cried, "Cause every man to go out from me." And he wept aloud. Verse 3, he said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Talk about getting kicked in the gut. I am Joseph. I'm telling you, they must about, mouth falling to the floor, in disbelief. All right, we'll stop there.